Welcome to the Aaron Harber Show, Colorado Business News. Today, this is part 2 of our two-part series with 3 members of the General Assembly. Senator Chris Harber. Chris, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Aaron.
Senator John Kafalis. John, thank you very much for being here.
Most welcome, sir.
And from the House, Representative Kit Rupe. Kit, thank you so much.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having us.
No, my pleasure as well. So we were talking about the culture of government in part 1, and everyone, of course, needs, if they haven't seen part 1, should run back after this show. They watch this show and see part 1. You know, one of the things I want to talk about was the senior homestead exemption, the senior property tax, where everyone based on age gets to save a little money on their real estate taxes. And to me, that struck me in terms of we're talking about the culture of government as really political pandering. And the reason I think it is because this break is extended to many people who don't even need it. It's also a situation where if you're low income, most counties have ways for you to volunteer, to work off whatever you owe. Was this exemption even necessary to begin with? I'm going to start with you, Chris. Do you have the courage to say, no, we shouldn't have this exemption, or it should be means tested?
I generally do not support means testing. Maybe in some places it has more value or is appropriate, but during my time in the legislature, I was actually able to vote to reinstate that. There was a timeout placed on it during the recession, and during the Republican majority in the House, we were able to restore that. In the community where I live and the people who I represent, we have a very high percentage of folks who do not have kids in our school district. They have lived on their property for extended periods of time, and it is one way that we can recognize that they have contributed to our community and to provide them some relief in their latter years of life. It is something that I have found in the community where I live, that most people who qualify are adamant about receiving it. To your point, does that indicate something that once you put it in place, it's nearly impossible to get rid of? Yeah, I understand that.
All right, John, what's your take on this?
Yes, thank you. Regarding the senior homestead property tax exemption, which actually is a constitutional measure, therefore it's more difficult to change if we wanted to have that discussion. But I do support actually means testing it. One of the reasons for that support is that if you look at the current budget year that we're in, the price tag of the senior homestead exemption is about $117 million out of a $9.7 billion general fund budget. So it's quite a bit of a price tag. And I think the original intent when the voters passed that, and I can't recall if that was 2000 or earlier, was to try to help seniors 65 and older who have paid their dues throughout their lives, those seniors especially that are on fixed incomes or low incomes, to try to help them offset some of these property taxes.
All right, and certainly I'm for helping those in need. I'm not big on helping those who don't need help, but Kit, what's your take?
Well, frankly, my district is pretty low income, and many of the seniors are living on a fixed income, and it does matter to them. If you were to eliminate this provision, they're going to go and find other services, so pay now or pay some other way from their perspective, and certainly this is one way to ensure that they're safe and they're okay and they're in their home and not going to be picked up by the Internal Revenue Service. But understanding what you're trying to say about those of higher income, it would be maybe something to consider as putting forward an idea that they opt out. They have plenty of income, they have a good home, and they don't really have a reliance or necessity or need, and they opt out. But that is a case of having a choice. I would say a large portion of our seniors at some point or another are going to face a high medical bill or some other situation which could quickly change you from being in a very lucrative and well-positioned for your retirement to completely devastated and you're living off of subsistence.
All right, well, maybe we should talk about health care then. Does it make sense for Colorado to have its own health exchange? When you look at the budget for that exchange, which I think the newest budget is over $50 million, I think they have sold something like, and please correct correct me if I'm wrong, 150,000 policies or something on that order. So two things are happening. I mean, we're actually, the effective rate is like $300 or more per policy for the state to sell a policy. And on top of that, everybody's policy, I think most Coloradans don't realize this, everybody's policy is being taxed to fund this budget, and that means the 90% of Coloradans or more who do not go through the exchange. Does the exchange make sense? If so, why? If not, why not?
I think we have to keep in mind that if we didn't have our own state exchange, we would have the federal exchange, and it certainly has demonstrated it's abysmal in its own right. We have at least some state control over the current exchange as it stands, and so I think that that is at least a little closer to home and where we can manage it. As a state, because of our position, we can actually opt out or eliminate some of the mandates that have driven up some of the costs that we're talking about, and some of the services that are not being delivered necessarily, but like we talk about prenatal care and on a men's policy. So I think that it's very important for us to recognize that there are some things that are being considered in this upcoming legislative session to adjust the cost that it's going to be for the individuals. And that adjustment of cost is also going to reduce the amount of money that goes to those kinds of policies or that kind of care that's not being provided.
Well, maybe men need to be more involved in prenatal care, but that's another subject. John, give me your take on that.
Yes. Well, as a member of the Health Insurance Exchange Oversight Committee, we've obviously been involved since last session in oversight and really scrutinizing the operations of the state-based health insurance exchange, Connect for Health Colorado. I think it's logical to have a state-based exchange. There was an interesting process, but back in 2010, Senate Bill 200 established that. There was bipartisan support, but there are lots of reasons for all that bipartisan support. But in the end, I think there is logic to doing that. At the same time, there are legitimate concerns about the financial viability of the exchange in terms of money coming in and expenditures. When you mentioned the perhaps 150,000 covered lives, please don't quote me, although it's going to be on the air. I think 40,000 of those are from the people who have signed up with the health cooperative. And I suspect you're aware, sir, that there are concerns about that model.
Concerned about the financial viability of that model due to some of the decisions at the federal level recently, which jeopardize the...
Which is pulling some of the federal money and so forth. So yes to a state exchange, but at the same time, we are looking at, if we can't figure out the numbers, what are some of the options for continuing the state-based exchange, perhaps creating a hybrid, those kinds of things.
All right, Chris, you get the last word on this before we take a break.
Be kind.
Senate Bill 200
time's up.
was actually Senate Bill 200 was actually in 2011. That was my first year.
Thank you.
And I voted against it. I have supported legislation that Representative Janik Joshi has brought to repeal it. I believe that government is the most expensive and least effective way to solve a problem, and we are finding ways through the exchange and through Obamacare to make health care cost more. Was that the objective when the supporters set out for either or both of those? No. But I think that those of us who have held that perspective have once again been proved right. The government is not an efficient way to deliver this kind of service. I would like to get government out of the delivery of health care, out of the relationship between a doctor and the patient. But I'm in the minority. I don't have the unilateral authority to say, let's do away with this. So I am opposed to it, and I'm not surprised that we're in the situation that we are.
Okay, we're going to talk more topics about what's going on at the State House in a moment, but first we're going to take a break before we come back with our three panelists.
For information on how to help promote civil and mutually respectful discourse and support expansion of the distribution of our programs, please email info@harbertv.com.
Hi, I'm Aaron Harber, host of The Aaron Harber Show. For information about the program, who our upcoming guests and topics are, and ways you can participate, please go to our website. That's harbertv.com. And most of all, thanks for watching.
I'm Mary Robinson, former President of Ireland.
Hi, I'm Jim Cameron, Director of Avatar.
I'm Christina Johnson, former Undersecretary of Energy.
Hi, I'm Oliver Stone.
Hi, I'm Mike Peters. I'm the creator of Mother Goose and Grimm.
watch the Aaron Harber Show.
I would encourage you to watch the Aaron Harber Show. It's good fun.
Watch the Aaron Harber Show because he's a really cool guy.
Please watch the Aaron Harber Show, on which I do appear.
I want you to watch the Aaron Harber Show. Grimmy watches it every day.
I'm Aaron Harber, host of the Aaron Harber Show. You can follow the show on Twitter and find us on Facebook to get all the latest updates, see behind-the-scene photos, and make comments and ask me questions. You can see episodes before their TV broadcast, so like the show today.
Your opinions, ideas, suggestions, and criticisms related to guests, topics, questions, or the host are welcome. Please send an email to producer@harbortv.com.
Welcome back to the show. We're talking about issues with our State House representatives. So, Chris, I'm going to start with you since you had finished. You get a little extra time. But, you know, I just completed recently this year my Colorado Income Tax Form 104. It's now, we supposedly have a flat tax. This form is now 3 pages long. I want to know, A, why is that? You know, what happened to tax simplification? And you get to, if you want, optionally donate to a number of different organizations that are listed on the form. There are now 15, and I think there were last year as well. I donated to all 15. I didn't want to play favorites, so maybe I should have. But some of them, I mean, some of the names are like the Public Education Fund. Okay, I give money to the Public Education. What is the Public Education Fund? So those are, and there's another one I really like, the Colorado Healthy Rivers Fund. Are we cleaning up the Los Animas River with any of that money, Chris? And my favorite was the Roundup River Ranch Fund. Tell me, what is the Roundup River Ranch Fund?
I remember, I believe it was Representative Millie Hamner ran that bill, and forgive me if I'm wrong, Millie, if you're out there listening, but these are issues that come through. Some might be considered more pet projects or, you know, favorite charities. But because of the way our state operates, people look for those checkoff opportunities on the state tax return.
And they change. They can change.
Yes, yes, and we vote on those. It reminds me often of license plates, and I don't vote for new license plates either, and I tend, regardless of what.
I heard yours expired several years ago.
No, sir. I don't use the legislator plates, but. These are issues that I think are indicative because of the constitutional changes that we have. We can't raise taxes. So groups that are looking for more funding will often turn to inventing a license plate as a funding channel or coming to the legislature and asking for one of those check boxes on the tax form. As far as it being 3 pages, I would refer you to the Department of Revenue, and I can help you with that. But I don't create the tax form, so I'm not sure why it's 3 pages instead of 2 or 1.
What happened to the postcard concept? That's what I want to know, John. I mean, we even have the 9 Health Fair is one of the checkoffs. Now, I'm a big fan of KUSA and all the people at Channel 9, but do we need to give Channel 4 and Channel 7 and Channel 2 and 31 a checkoff box too for one of their charitable activities?
So it is important for folks to understand, excuse me, that there is a process by which nonprofit organizations get added to the tax form. First of all, there is a limit, and I think that limit may be 15 organizations. And that was intentionally put in place because if you had 25 organizations, it's diluting everything, and it can be pretty overwhelming and confusing. So it's important for folks to know there's a process, and ultimately, the way that groups come off of that is if they don't raise a certain amount of money over a period of years, they do come off, and then that creates a space for different organizations to, through legislation, there is a bill that has to go through the process to get on that list. So that's one piece of the tax form. But I mean, your question, I think, is bigger on the tax code. And of course, we do have a flat tax rate in Colorado. There's a lot of aspects of that, but 4.63%. We have the state sales and use tax. you know, we have a flat tax rate, and you know, there's different opinions about that. One thing I will quickly point out, sir, is that one thing that's going to be different this year, which frankly I had a hand in, the state earned income tax credit, and that is that it was set up as a Tabor refund mechanism, and ultimately it will put more money in people's pockets, and because of the fact that we're over the Tabor revenue surplus, it triggers on the EITC, 10% of the federal EITC, potentially helping about 350,000 working families that are making low incomes to try to help address some of this issue of, depending on how you want to frame it, income inequality, or the fact that, you know, low-wage workers are having a hard time making ends meet. The EITC triggers on. After this year, it becomes part of our tax code.
Okay. All right. Kit, what's your take on any of this tax simplification matter?
Well, having served on House Finance, it was an education even just this year to be part of the process that Senator Kafalis was just talking about. And it is a case where they have to earn so much money in order for them to come back on. But we debated it. Is this still a need? Is it still something we have to have? And I think we go through that whole process when we talk about all the different taxes that come in front of us. And sometimes it's tax incentives, sometimes it's tax credits. We've done that for the fires so that the folks that had fires and they're having some challenges, they get a break. So each time we look at changing something in the tax code, trying to simplify it or tailor it to some of the individual needs of our constituents, it's going to make that a little bit longer. Do I want it simplified? Yeah, but I don't want to take away some of those choices either.
Okay, well, one of the things, of course, a little tax advice, if you donate money to these organizations, you can then take it off as a deduction if you itemize your deductions in the following year when you file your taxes. I bet a lot of people forget to include whatever they donate, by the way, to you know, on their next tax form. I know I always forget. So anyway, doesn't matter. So let's talk about higher education. Speaking of donation, what's the proper role of the state in higher education? There seems to be a lot of discussion about the lack of a stable funding mechanism. Higher education seems to have been kind of the evil stepsister in the budget, where when budget cuts occur, it seems to suffer a lot. John, I want to start with you. What's your take on what's going on and what should we do?
So I think it's important that we make proper investments in higher education. One of the issues that we're confronted with all the time is the cost of quality, you know, access to a quality college education. And we know that historically the state general funding of higher education was about 2/3 of that, and of course that's flipped, where students are having oftentimes to take on more student loan debt and having to cover the difference.
Where the state, what you were saying, the state used to cover 2/3 of the cost of
now,
educating a student. Now it's actually I'm sure it's way under 1/3 these days.
Yeah, so the 2/3 cost is coming from students and their families. You know, tuition has gone up, and there is financial aid available, and the College Opportunity Fund and all of those things. But in the end, I think it's a disproportionate burden on students and their families.
Chris, what do you think we ought to do? I mean, I think for some universities, the amount of state funding is what? Well under 10%
yes,
of institutions' budget. Should we free them from state supervision or state control and let them go off on their own, or what?
That was the primary reason that I opposed a bill last year for the legislature to cap tuition increases at no more than 6%. I'm now a legislative advisor appointed by President Cadman to the Commission on Higher Education. We're carrying on that conversation. I think the universities, the institutions, are going to propose now a process where they would come and self-impose tuition caps. And I like that scenario much better than us arguing about it in the legislature. They understand higher ed much better than the 100 people who work at the Capitol. So if they come with a recommendation, I'm much more comfortable in supporting that than having a bill passed that would limit that to some number over a period of time. But to your point, Aaron, you're right. The measures that I have asked higher ed to provide to the legislators are, what's the percentage of general fund revenue that comes from the legislature in relation to tuition cost, and we generally see those numbers, but then also what's the percentage that we provide relative to the total revenue of that institution, and show that to us for each institution, because it has to be dramatic, eye-opening information for legislators who think that we're 25, 30, maybe 50% of the total revenue. We are not. We are a decreasing shareholder, if I can use that term, at the state level, and we have increasingly needed to allow those institutions to find their own way. Unless the people of Colorado were to suddenly say we want to pay more, we have to deal with the reality of a finite number of dollars in the general fund every year. 40 cents out of every dollar goes to K through 12. Higher ed comes after that. When we look at Medicaid and Medicare, that's equaling now K through 12. So we're up north of 80 cents on every dollar that we control goes to just Medicaid, Medicare, and K through 12. So we don't have the ability to solve this problem for higher ed, and we need to get out of their way and let them solve these problems in their innovative ways.
Okay, Kit, did you have a quick comment on that?
I don't know if I've been quick all along, Aaron, I'm sorry, but I do. I think that Senator Holbert's exactly right, frankly. They have come up with different portfolios on how they can find different resources of dollars, whether it be research and development for private corporations or what have you. I think it's really important that we don't expect that we have to pay for all of it. So I really appreciate this opportunity to comment on it. It's not something more than having been a student recently that I can say more than that.
All right, well, it's been a couple years since I've been a student, but we're going to come back for our final segment in part 2 of our 2-part series with our panel.
For information on how to help promote civil and mutually respectful discourse and support expansion of the distribution of our programs, please email info@harbertv.com.
Hi, I'm Aaron Harber, host of The Aaron Harber Show. For information about the program, who our upcoming guests and topics are, and ways you can participate, please go to our website. That's harbertv.com. And most of all, thanks for watching.
I'm Mary Robinson, former President of Ireland.
Hi, I'm Jim Cameron, Director of Avatar.
I'm Christina Johnson, former Undersecretary of Energy.
Hi, I'm Oliver Stone.
Hi, I'm Mike Peters. I'm the creator of Mother Goose and Grimm.
Watch The Aaron Harber Show.
I would encourage you to watch the Aaron Harber Show. It's good fun.
Watch The Aaron Harber Show, because he's a really cool guy.
Please watch The Aaron Harber Show, on which I do appear.
I want you to watch the Aaron Harber Show. Grimmy watches it every day.
I'm Aaron Harber, host of The Aaron Harber Show. You can follow the show on Twitter and find us on Facebook to get all the latest updates, see behind-the-scenes photos, and make comments and ask me questions. You can see episodes before their TV broadcast, so like the show today.
Your opinions, ideas, suggestions, and criticisms related to guests, topics, questions, or the host are welcome. Please send an email to producer@harbertv.com.
I'm Aaron Harber, host of The Aaron Harber Show. We depend on contributions to support our work to bring you some of the nation's and world's top opinion leaders. Individuals, businesses, foundations, and other nonprofits make tax-deductible contributions to the Democracy and Media Education Foundation to allow us to work for you. To find out more or to make a donation, please go to dmefd.org. Thanks for watching the show and for your support. I'm Aaron Harber, host of The Aaron Harber Show. You can follow the show on Twitter and find us on Facebook to get all the latest updates, see behind-the-scenes photos, and make comments and ask me questions. You can see episodes before their TV broadcast, so like the show today.
Your opinions, ideas, suggestions, and criticisms related to guests, topics, questions, or the host are welcome. Please send an email to producer@harbertv.com.
Welcome back to the show. This is our final segment in part 2 of our 2-part series with Chris Holbert, John Kafalis, and Kit Rupe. So, John, I want to start with you. It seems like over the last decade, there have been a stream of headlines in terms of our failure or different systems failure when it comes to protecting our youth. We read stories about infants or very young children who die, who have been mistreated. We read about the over-medication population of young people in state care. There just seem to be constantly new problems popping up. Are we doing a better job than we did several years ago? Are we not doing a better job? And what are reasonable expectations? I mean, any system is not going to be perfect. We're going to see bad stories on occasion, but it seems in Colorado we've seen too many of these stories. Am I wrong?
Thank you, Aaron. I think that you are correct in that we have seen over the last 10 years perhaps a lot of attention to this issue of child welfare, child protection, and child fatalities. The reality of abuse and neglect is with us, and I think one of the fundamental purposes of government is to make sure that we're protecting children. That's critical. I think that regarding our child welfare systems, we have made improvements over the years, and yet we still read about in the newspapers or on the TV of children that have been subjected to abuse and neglect and oftentimes resulted in death. One example of improvement is the Child Welfare Hotline, which was instituted this past year, and there's an outreach campaign that goes to that. Another example of improvement is where we've been addressing the caseload issue. The legislature appropriated or allocated dollars to hire more child protection workers. One of the issues is that they're dealing with pretty intense issues, and their caseloads are significant. So yes, we are making improvements, but at the same time, there are legitimate concerns about problems where we see these stories. The last thing I'll say, sir, because this is not easy, is the balance between the protection of the child, which is foremost, with keeping families whole. And if you think about it, I wouldn't want to be a child protection worker because that is an immense issue to try to determine. Yes. Okay,
so Chris, one of the issues certainly as a parent, I think a lot of people have a certain paranoia about government involvement in their families. The idea that child protection services can come and take your kids away. How do we strike a reasonable balance so that government doesn't overstep its role?
Right. I think maybe back to that adult civics, let's keep talking about that and remind ourselves that we the people come first, that our responsibility to raise our own kids is first and foremost our own responsibility, and the government shouldn't be that all-encompassing catch-all. Let's not rely on a government that has very limited resources like our state government does. And one issue, if I can mention, that I was so excited to see the bipartisan interaction on a bill that I ran dealing with truancy, putting kids in jail for being truant. And now the judicial branch is going through a review process and trying to reinvent itself there and do that less often.
Kit, you're going to get the last word. I mean, I'm wondering if a lot of people, when they become parents, really don't know what it means to be a parent and what those responsibilities are and what those obligations are. Should the state, which imposes a lot of requirements on us as parents, require some type of class or courses or instruction, whether it be at your church or school or whatever, so parents have a better idea before they're parents, people before they have kids, have a much better understanding of what they're getting into?
Well, I appreciate the question. I think that it doesn't necessarily belong in the public sector. It should be between a family or a church or even people you trust within your community that help you with some of that. We all know we're not born with these manuals that figure out how to do it, and we've always, over the years, we've seen an increase in the amount of education that we expect of our education system, and we criticize it for how effective it is, and that's trying to make up for the difference. So frankly, I think that less government is better in this case, keeping families together and stepping in where it really will make a difference and be impactful in helping the kids and protect our children. That's where I think we should put our attention.
All right. Well, I want to thank my guests, Chris Holbert, John Kafalis, and Kit Rupe for joining me today. I'm Aaron Harber. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.